We're now live on YouTube, Chairman.
Right, okay. Thank you, Jeanette. Right, I'm going to start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Boston Borough Council's Corporate and Community Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Woodliff, and I'm the chairman of this committee. My vice chairman is Councillor Anton Denny to my right. Firstly, can I ask everyone, when you're speaking, please make sure you are speaking directly into the microphone so that everyone can hear you. I must advise you that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. I will now ask committee members to introduce themselves. So if I go to you, Anton first.
My name is Councillor Anton Denny. I'm the deputy chairman for this committee.
My name's Frank Pickett. I'm chairman of licensing, and my ward is Old Leek and Mangle. Thank you.
Good evening, David Brown, councillor for Curtin and Frampton.
Councillor Paul Goodale, councillor for Station Ward. I'm substituting for Councillor Alan Bell, who is a councillor for Fenside.
Councillor Judy Welburn, councillor for Coastal Ward, substituting for Martin Howard.
Pippa? Oh.
I am Pippa Rose, the Democratic Service Apprentice.
Yes, good evening. My name is Councillor Edward Mossop. I'm East Lindsey District Council member for the Fulstow Ward, which is to the north of Louth, and I'm here because of the joint scrutiny item. Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor Noble, Jonathan Noble. I'm portfolio holder for finance and commercials. I'm here as a guest, and because the CTS paper is before you this evening. Thank you.
I'm Sharon Hammond. I'm the head of revenues and benefits for public sector partnerships.
Can you bring the microphone close to you? Otherwise, you won't be able to hear. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat that?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm Sharon Hammond, the head of revenues and benefits for public sector partnership services.
Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor Nigel Welton, Deputy Leader of the Council. I'm here to present the agenda item 4 of the review of the corporate strategy. Thank you.
Andy Fisher, Assistant Director of Assets for the South East Links Partnership and Lead Officer for this committee.
Thank you very much. Now I welcome Councillor Edward Mossop from East Lindsey District Council, who's here to assist Councillor Judith Skinner with the presentation of the report of the Joint Scrutiny Panel. So welcome, Councillor Mossop. Welcome to the committee. Those attending virtually will be James Gilbert and Jeanette Collier. Right, we move to part 1 of the agenda, the preliminaries. To receive apologies for absence and notice of any substitutions, if any. Pippa.
There are apologies from Councillor Alan Bell, Vivian Edge, Martin Howard and Yvonne Stevens. Councillor Paul Goodale is here as substitute for Councillor Bell, and Councillor Judy Welborn is substitute for Councillor Howard. Also, Councillors Tom Ashton, Alison Austin and Judith Skinner give apologies for not being able to attend in person. They are joining virtually but will not be able to take part in any voting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. To receive any declarations of interest in respect of any item on this agenda. Does any member have any interest to declare? Yes, Councillor Goodale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, obviously an interest, but whether it's a one that stops me voting, I'm not sure, but I'll take your advice on that. Obviously, with regard to the joint scrutiny panel report on the agenda this evening, I was actually a member of that panel, and I'm also a member of the town board. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, I think Councillor Tom Ashton is on the screen. He's got his hand up.
Right, okay. Councillor Tom Ashton, do you want to speak? I thought you wouldn't be here, actually. I thought you sent a message, but obviously you can make it, so you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, apologies for not being there in person, but as you can see, I am able to tune in remotely, which I thought was better than not being present at all. I would just like, appreciating that I can't vote this evening, but I think it's right that I declare my interest in respect of agenda item 1 this evening. Insofar as I am an executive member of East Lindsey District Council, whilst I appreciate that my comments in this meeting would always be in relation to my role as Boston Borough Councillor. The fact that this is a piece of joint scrutiny between the two councils, I think it would be inappropriate of me to involve myself in that debate, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I was also part of the joint scrutiny panel, so I'll declare an interest as well, Chairman.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Wellborn. And the same applies to me, of course, because I sit on the joint scrutiny. So there's an interest to be declared there, but I don't see the problem really with this, because we're only we make a recommendation. We're not a decision-making body as such. So I don't think there's really a problem about this. However, I do sit on the scrutiny panel for the Strategic Alliance along with other members, but I don't see the problem about speaking on this, because as I say, we're not a decision-making body. We are a consultation body. Now, so our first item is a report on the joint BBC Boston Borough Council East Lincolnshire Council scrutiny of the Strategic Alliance, which starts on page 1 of the agenda pack. Councillor Judith Skinner and Councillor Edward Mossop, the Chairman and Vice Chairman of the Joint Scrutiny Panel, presented. I'll move to Councillor Skinner first. Councillor Judith Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. It's just to say that in July, Boston Borough Council and East Lindsey District Council formed a strategic alliance, and the councils retained their independence. They've been working towards a single officer team to deliver their respective priorities. The alliance was projected to deliver 15.4 million in savings over 10 years, whilst providing both councils with greater capacity to deliver their priorities. The Joint Scrutiny Panel was asked to undertake a review of the alliance and merge workforce, focusing on 4 key areas. First one was to understand the progress that has been made so far in bringing together the functions and teams across the alliance, to assess whether joint working on the planning and delivery of services has mitigated pressures on the council's budget, and whether projected savings, money and capacity are being achieved. 3, to understand the opportunities that have been secured by the councils working collaboratively together. And 4, to understand how it has been possible to merge cultures with the difficulties that have arisen from this and how they can be managed. The panel met 3 times. We interviewed 6 witnesses. The questions can be found in Appendix C, and conducted a survey among Boston Borough Councils and East Lindsey District Councillors to canvass their views. The results of the surveys are attached in Appendix D. Managing a scrutiny across our 2 councils is no easy task, as alignment of councillors' diaries to attend these joint meetings becomes more difficult. This is illustrated by the fact that the report is led by myself and Councillor Mossop, for whom I thank for chairing the 3rd meeting, because I was unable to do so because of the time factor. Going forward, these difficulties could be exacerbated by the entry of South Holland into the alliance, and so we note that the early fixing of dates for future joint scrutinies would be welcomed. That said, the panel could not have managed this process without the guidance and expertise from Rebecca James and James Gilbert, who were supportive throughout the meetings, and both, I'm sure myself and Councillor Mossop are grateful to them, and also to the witnesses who were interviewed, for willingly giving up their evening to talk to us. The remote meetings were conducted in a relaxed yet challenging manner, and all the councillors present contributed to the debate, and for that I thank everybody. The interview was conducted over 2 meetings with senior councillors and members of the officer leadership team, including the Chief Executive. Members adhered to the 4 key areas of inquiry as outlined above, and used evidence from councillors' questionnaires and information from the staff satisfaction survey to challenge the witnesses. The interviewees gave a wholly positive picture of the progress of the alliance, illustrated by the examples of how teams across the 2 councils have come together. We sought assurance that the projected savings, as outlined in the original agreement, were being achieved. They are. We asked for examples of how collaborative working has further opportunities for both councils, e.g. the Towns Fund bid, and further suggested ways in which the Alliance could effectively use combined power to achieve successful outputs, e.g. lobbying on behalf of the IDBs. We asked about how the merging cultures of the 2 and now 3 councils can be successfully managed, and our recommendations have highlighted suggested ways of doing this to create a common identity for this large area of Lincolnshire. The notes from our meetings are attached in Appendix E. In addition to the witnesses who were interviewed, the panel agreed to send out a short questionnaire to all councillors to gauge their views on how they felt the Alliance was progressing. We received 15 responses. The full results are attached in Appendix D. There are several common themes that emerged from the responses, which have formed the basis for some of our recommendations. These include clear lines of communications, cementing relationships, alignment of policies, and joint meetings. Not all councillors were positive about the Alliance, and it is also noted that a large majority did not respond to the questionnaire. Thank you to those who did respond and for the useful pointers that guided us. Councillor Mossop has then said, because this was in the last meeting, that the final hour of discussion led to the refining of the recommendations, which were circulated and agreed by all members. So in addition, recommendation relating to the continuing joint scrutiny monitoring of the now 3-way alliance was included to ensure this important joint work of non-executive councillors continues going forward. And I put to you the recommendations on page 7, numbered 1 to 11. I'll just hand over now to Councillor Mossop if he would like to add anything to that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Mossop.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Skinner. That's a very good summary of what happened at our particular scrutiny meeting. I won't go into detail about the recommendations, but I think that you can see they're quite well grouped in terms of issues that were eked out of the scrutiny process. It's not easy to do joint scrutiny. And it's going to get more difficult as we get further down the line with working with South Holland. So I think we've really got to try and make time for that in terms of how we conduct meetings and program meetings for the future if it's going to be productive. And I think this is a productive meeting that we work in a friendly, cooperative but challenging manner. I hope people feel, and we try to be inclusive to make sure that everybody gets a say in those particular meetings. I think one of the things we feel we want to do also is to encourage that strong sense of identity within our 3 particular areas, yet retain our sovereignty, making sure that you're still elected members for Boston Council, we are for East Lindsey, but joint working. And I know it happens across portfolio holders because Councillor Noble spoke to us at the first meeting, but I think we need more of that and more sort of social contact as well. And it's a pleasure to be here to just, albeit briefly, to come along to this meeting. And I think it's also important that our continuing overview in East Lindsey and your scrutiny committees here at Boston keep an eye on the snapshot surveys that were reported to our joint scrutiny on a relatively 6-month basis to ensure that we have still got the motivation and the staff behind us, because that was something that has been raised by members of the council who felt there was a bit of disquiet about that. And so we'd like to see that kind of information coming back to our scrutiny committees in future meetings. So and finally, we certainly want to make sure that we're doing this kind of review on an annual basis with the 3 of us next year. So that was why post the meeting I did ask if we could put a final recommendation, number 11, which is to convene a shared scrutiny panel of the 3 councils, because I don't think that was actually mentioned in the mem and arts of the triple alliance, as I call it.
Okay.
Anyway, Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Skinner, as well, for allowing me to join in as well as co-chair.
It was a pleasure.
Fine, thank you, Councillor Moss. And you want to say anything more, Councillor Skinner? Do you
No,
want to add
thank
anything
you.
else, Judy?
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. Now, does anybody wish to speak on this? Any comments from anybody? No comments? I must have got a few questions myself. I'm looking at the Appendix D, Councillor questionnaire results. That's right. I've got quite a lot of questions really on this, really. I know that I'm, in theory, a member of the panel, but I am concerned with some of the comments made by, I think it's councillors. Appendix D is councillors, if I remember rightly. Communications comes up again. Communications is a serious issue here. You know, I don't know what everyone does as well previously, you know. So we've got problems here with questions. Yes? Sorry, yes, Councillor Goodale. All right. Okay, it's page 13, isn't it? It's Appendix D, isn't it? Part of the report, if I remember rightly. If I can find it. Yeah, I can find the information. Is it Appendix D? Isn't it? Here's, okay, even I lose the pages sometime. Yeah, here we are. Appendix D, question, councillor questionnaire results, isn't it? The appendices at the back. I mean, that's my concern is about that. I'm very concerned also about the pressures on senior staff managing portfolios across 3 authorities and the geographical and personal issues associated when you're dealing with 3 authorities. I think that's something that's really got to be looked in very hard here, because we're asking a lot of our senior staff to be able to work across 3 new authorities or 3 authorities when we're combining this, you know, combining people's work schedules and so on. So I think communications is a serious issue that comes out of this councillor report. And comment here, make a management board that knows what it needs doing and comes up with the goods. That's another comment that's made amongst this. Yeah, put people before money is a mistake. Various other comments here. Not seen any positives, but felt there's negatives. Boston IT staff leaving, and job responsibilities should be in plain English, not council speak. So there's quite a lot of issues being raised by people in Appendix D. There's quite a lot of serious issues which I think will have to be tackled. If this arrangement, work arrangement, is going to be successful, then everybody does need to know what's going on. We need to be conscious about the pressures of putting on senior staff, managing these very large portfolios with very large, wide areas, and the geographical issues involved, because we're dealing with a very large area. If it's almost down from Grimsby down to, you know, Crowland, effectively, it's a long way down. So it's a wide area. So I am concerned about that. That's come out of the survey. Now, I'll leave it. Does anybody else want to make any comments, or am I the only person to have comment on this? Nobody else wants to make a statement? Oh, thank you, Councillor Goodale. I'm not alone after all then.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll help you out. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I think members do actually think that you know, we have put a great emphasis on senior staff looking at effectively expanding their roles. I would point to members probably being more negative about the alliance than positive. But I think at the end of the day, we are where we are. There's no going back anymore. It's not as if we can change it. I know we have the option at the end of the year of saying no, thank you, but realistically, that's unaffordable. So we are where we are. So I think we really need to pick out the positives rather than the negatives and just work on that one, really. And at the end of the day, I mean, if members feel that our senior staff spread too thinly, then there is only one answer to that, and that's to employ more senior staff. But that really, at the end of the day, wasn't the exercise, was it? I mean, the exercise was to drain the pond, not fill it up with more water. I understand what you're saying, and I think to some degree I agree with you. But hopefully with keeping this putting a senior member of staff in each district should actually help with your concerns. But obviously, I think my own thoughts are that the main reason for this is to look to a unitary authority, and if that's because the savings are there, but they're only once, aren't they? So that's my view on this. But I mean, I think we need to look at really we need to concentrate on the positives rather than the negatives, and build on what we have. And I think from this meeting, the positive that really came out of this meeting was actually meeting and speaking with fellow councillors from East Lindsey, who, surprise, surprise, had similar views to what what we had. So I think that was I think if we as members look at a success for members out of this, that is one success, because I think that was a very successful meeting, if you like, the scrutiny boards, although we couldn't all attend all the meetings because of other commitments. But I do think that collectively it worked quite well, even though it was online, and it's far, you know, and it's although I did know a couple of the councillors on East Lindsey prior to that, but it's and I think one of the recommendations in here is a very good one, that you know, that we actually try and share a little between councils member wise, to actually bring that together a little bit more, because I think you know, we did actually learning from each other, if you like, and learning each other's thoughts and views. Helped really to shape a lot of the recommendations in here, and I think so the positives for me were that, and obviously you know, we are where we are, so we have to move forward, and there are a lot of positives that have come out of the alliance, and some of the things that member comments on here are now have actually been taken with the new directory and the like, so a lot of the questions are now being answered, I suppose. So all in all, whatever people think of the alliance, all we were doing was really just seeing how it was working and how to move it forward. And I think what the piece of work we took on actually did that. I mean, it just really is a way of moving forward rather than concentrating on the negatives, trying to put what we see as negatives right and concentrating on the way forward. And I think that's really all we can do.
Well,
thank
you, Councillor Goodale. I didn't actually participate in the questionnaire, so I'm only reading out what other people's comments are. You did you? All right. Which one's that then, may I ask? Which anonymous one is that? Right, okay. Councillor Antondani, you want to pick up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few points I want to touch on. I mean, it's good to have a scrutiny in three ways, because as Councillor Goodale said, it's a learning curve for all of us, so we can learn from each other. My question on this is basically a simple one. Let's say, because we are just there to recommend to the cabinet, and basically we will have three cabinets on three sides. So we're not having a common cabinet. So once we make a decision, for example, as the three-way scrutiny, and each one of the members of the scrutiny will go back to their cabinet and propose to them. My issue here, our recommendation may be adopted by Boston, but it will not be adopted by probably East Lindsey. So how are we going to work that? This is probably for me, it's one of the things I probably not dread, but I just want to see how it's going to work. If we adopt a recommendation by our cabinet will adopt it, and then East Lindsey will say, no, it doesn't suit us. So can anybody answer this question, please?
Does anybody wish to answer the question? Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did ask Mr. Fisher if it would appropriate, and I think thanks for bringing me in. We don't work in isolation. as a cabinet in we have our identity, our political identity for each authority, but that doesn't mean that we don't speak to each other. And there are joint meetings with both cabinets at the moment, and we'll end up being all three. We do discuss these. There has been a lot of changes since the scrutiny process started. It's an evolving process. Communications have changed slightly. Some of the negatives in here have been picked up. So it's not about individual councils making individual decisions. We have our autonomy. However, at a leadership level, we do have joint meetings where we do share, and there's give and take as well. We might compromise on something, East Lindsey might compromise on something else, but at the end of the day, it's about bringing the best of both together. And one thing I would like to say while I've got the floor is that I'm really pleased that both councils can work together in scrutiny. I think that is really, really effective. To the people that we serve, it's a line on the map. To us, it's separate councils. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if you're in one side or the other, that you still get a really, really good service. And the resources that we're putting out on the ground now are absolutely fantastic. I don't think we live in an ideal world, and I'm not going to sit here and say everything is absolutely perfect. But the fact that we do have this joint scrutiny report that will be coming to Cabinet, that does explain it all, warts and all, and that people have the confidence to say what they think isn't perfect, but we also have to have a balance and look at what is better and what is good. Because we can walk through the flower bed, can't we, and only look at the weeds. And if you do that, you forget to see the flowers. So, I think you've got to take it on balance. There are some negatives, there are some positives. The negatives we need to learn from, and the positives that we make sure keep there. So it isn't an isolation thing. It's not just about here. This does go all the way up, and there are joint meetings that we do discuss these as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Welton. I think it's a very thorough answer. I suppose my only view is, being a gardener, if you don't watch out for the weeds, they're all over the place. So you've really got to deal with it. Yes, Councillor Noble. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to address the issue of alleged communication problems, which surprised me because when the Strategic Alliance was formed, we were given a contact sheet. And on that contact sheet, it has the names of all the senior officers. It has their email addresses and their telephone numbers. And one may argue that perhaps portfolio holders get a better response than members. I don't know, but I can only speak from my personal experience. And I can only think of only one occasion when I haven't had a response to an email request or question within 2 days.
Yep. Okay, thanks very much. I didn't spot. Do apologise, Councillor Noble. I was being reminded of falling down to my duties. I didn't notice that Judith and Paul wanted to speak. But anyway, did you finish what you wanted to say?
Yes, so just the other thing I'd like to say in response to what Councillor Downing was saying about common cabinet. Obviously, there will be no common cabinet because each council is a sovereign and separate body, and our interests may not always converge. Most of the time they will, but not necessarily. So each cabinet must do what is best within its own authority. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Come back to Councillor Noble, please, if I may. My question was dealing with anything on the scrutiny, the joint scrutiny, the three-way scrutiny. If there is a recommendation accepted by the three-way scrutiny, and each one will carry it to their cabinet, one of the cabinet may say, yes, it's good a recommendation, we can take it. Thank you. But another side may say it doesn't suit us, so we're not taking it. That was my question. And that's why Councillor Walton, when he answered, he said, yes, there is a discussion on high level to accommodate all the recommendation. That was my question. And I think it was fine. The answer was acceptable.
We have three separate councils. This is the whole point. We have a joint administration, if you like, but we have three separate councils, and each council can make a decision on its own. We're not a unitary as yet. Judith, I apologise. Are you going to come first, or Paul?
Ladies.
Ladies.
Thank you, Chair. I was just listening to the debate, and a lot of the members that were on the joint scrutiny have covered a lot of it regarding the communications. Is we all the councillors did, or I've received a sort of directory of who's and the contact numbers and everything. So that should have cleared that one up, and I'm sure that Mr. Barlow and both leaders and the leaders of the South Island as well will take away from what's been said in these surveys and make sure things are sorted. The only thing is say there's only 15 councillors contributed to the survey. So do you consider the ones that haven't replied are happy with things? Normally people make voice things when they're unhappy. So on the basis of how many haven't replied, you could say that overall it's fairly favourable. And also regarding the meetings being online, I do feel obviously that we do need to meet up, but for these sort of joint scrutiny meetings and the distance that would be travelled by councillors to meet up, we have to think of our climate strategy. And it did seem to go very well online, so I will leave that in the thoughts of people's mind that we've got to consider our climate strategy when we make these joint meetings. And I'll hand over to Councillor Paul Skinner.
Yes, Paul. Okay. Councillor Paul Skinner.
Good evening, Chairman. And for those that don't know me, I'm Paul Skinner. I'm the leader of the council. Didn't introduce myself at the start, so thought I'd just get that over. Really, point of order on the computer experts, our IT staff. We had one person leave, and because maybe he got a better job, or maybe he wasn't happy with PSPS, but the other two have actually been promoted. So I think to say that a bland statement like our IT staff have left is actually untrue. Looking at the surveys and stuff, when you do change within an organisation, it's not unusual to it depends when you measure it. The item is, as suggested earlier, we need to be asking those questions quite a bit and monitor as the change goes through. Lots of positives, but partnership working is not uncommon, and it's really quite productive, because as Paul Goodale was saying, Councillor Paul Goodale was saying, we all bring different views and different expertise to the equation, and there's a big learning exercise there, and one of the most positive things I see from the staff is the way it all fits together and the expertise there. We've got most bases covered now, so really positive stuff. But thanks for letting me speak, Chairman. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you, Paul. Judith, do you want to speak again? Your hand's up.
Sorry, Chair, legacy hand. Apologies.
No problem at all. Right. Who else? Yes, Councillor Wellborn. Judith, yeah.
Yeah, as part of the sort of joint scrutiny, I think we ought to realise from the survey that it's now 2 months old. So perhaps some of the council view may have changed. I do look forward to the fact we agreed to do it 6 monthly, because then we will get a better snapshot of what's happening. And I'm quite looking forward to the three-way partnership. I know it's going to be difficult trying to get meetings in, as we all found out before, but I think we are moving in the right direction. I think the three-way scrutiny will be interesting, if nothing else.
Fine, that's very, very good. Thank you much, Judy, for your contribution. Anybody else wish to make a comment? I'll come back to one that concerns me, and that is pressure on senior staff. I do worry about that. We expect a lot of our senior staff. They carry a heavy burden. I am concerned about the pressure on them, and I think that needs to be taken on board by Rob Barlow and the crew at the top. The pressure that's on the next level down is very considerable. So that's my one concern, really. the pressure on senior staff one level down. Yeah, Rob Marler's got to take that on board, in my opinion, and make sure that work pressures are not too great. We don't want anybody go crashing out at that level. It's key. These people are key people. Apart from that, really got no other comments, I suppose. Really, that's the things I noticed on the questionnaire. Obviously, it's an old questionnaire, and not a great many people participated in it. But we still have to take a note of what's been said, even if we don't think there's too many people here. It's important we take note. And communication, I say, is important. It's not just important here, by the way. It's important in the NHS as an area which I have some interest in. Communication is a really serious issue there, in my opinion, and probably right across the public services. So it's something we have to work at. Now, does anybody else wish to speak? I've said too much, really, probably. Anybody else want to say anything? No? Okay, fair enough. We better go to a recommendation, I think, haven't we? The recommendation is that the Corporate and Community Committee, rather, all right, notes the report and recommends it for consideration at the next full council meeting. I have to ask for a proposer. Anybody going to propose this?
I would propose that.
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew. Councillor Danny proposes.
I need a second.
Yes. Who's going to second it? Thank you, Councillor Brown. So Councillor Brown seconds. Yep. Excellent. Thank you, David. Right. All those in favour?
Clearly carried, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody against? No. No. Any abstentions? No. So well done. So it looks so it's going to go through. Excellent. Okay, fine. Right, Edward, do you want to stay, or have you got better?
Well, allow me to stay to listen to a bit of your debate. I'd be interested.
That's fine. And actually, if you want to make any comments or statements, I'm perfectly happy to allow it.
Oh, that's very kind of you, but I won't do that. But I'll just listen and take it home to our scrutiny committees.
It's fine. That's okay. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for your contribution anyway. Our second item is a report on the local council tax scheme 2022-2023, which starts on page 23 of the agenda pack. And Sharon Hammond, the head of revenues and benefits, will present it. Mrs. Hammond, are you okay to present?
Thank you, Chair.
It's all yours.
Thank you. So this report covers the review for the council tax support scheme for the current year, and it considers the proposals for the next financial year, 2022-23. The proposals are currently in consultation, and the recommendation around the scheme will go to Cabinet on the 8th of December and Council on the 17th of January 2022. Just as a reminder, the first part of the report under the introduction and background, that provides a reminder for members for the background of how the local council tax support scheme was introduced as part of the welfare reform changes. At the time, the government did sort of state expectations around the expectations for local authorities in what it would consider needed to be in local schemes, whilst giving control locally to set the local schemes. Just a couple of key points really on that as a reminder again is that the local council tax support scheme is really a scheme that relates purely to the working age, because the scheme for pensioners continues to be prescribed by central government. So the decision around any localisation and changes in the level of support and so on is purely in relation to working age claimants. At 1.7 on the report, we do just provide as a reminder as when the scheme was delivered centrally as council tax benefit, which was a national scheme back in 2012. There is a breakdown there provided around the total numbers that were in receipt of council tax benefit and the total council tax benefit expenditure at that time. So that just provides a useful sort of backstop, if you like, to look each year at where we are now in comparison. Again, just a point to make is that the level of council tax support in any year, the caseload and the level of expenditure will always fluctuate because people are coming on, they're going off and so on. The circumstances will change through the year. And it's only really at the end of a financial year that we absolutely can be certain about what the total expenditure is for the year. Pensioner awards will attract a higher level of award purely because the government still protect and allow up to 100% support. Moving on to section 2, Boston's local scheme. Again, just a reminder of where we are currently is that since 2013 and the introduction of local schemes, Boston's scheme has provided for a number of principles which have applied each year. And that does continue to protect the vulnerable. The pension age, as we've already said, is legislated. We have to protect pension age in any respect, but also the decision to protect war pensioners. That's a local decision, and that has continued right through the whole, several years since the introduction. We do continue to base the scheme on a means-tested approach, and that's very similar to the old means-tested approach under the national scheme, the council tax benefit scheme. And that's a scheme that's sort of familiar to people. It continued, nothing really changed. We continue to look at the income of people, the capital, the circumstances of a household. So again, very consistent approach moving from the national scheme into the local. The scheme is reviewed annually. Now, that is a legislative requirement, and actually Boston have continued in compliance with legislation to review the scheme annually. As I've mentioned, war pensioners continue to be protected from any reductions in support. And a key element really for Boston, one of the main parts is that for working age claimants, the maximum entitlement is capped at 75%. So all working age households will have at least 25% of their council tax liability to meet. For 21-22 scheme, the projected costs were contained within the budgeted resources. And as in previous years, the decision was taken to uprate in line with the DWP, the government sort of uprating, as we call it. Just a reminder as well that for 21-22, a decision was taken last year to make a change to the scheme, which is on the back of universal credit and the increased take-up of universal credit. When people move on to universal credit and they're on council tax support, every time they get a monthly payment through their universal credit, it triggers a change on the council tax support levels. And what that meant up until the change that was introduced for 21-22 is that every month the council tax support also had to be reassessed. So actually last year what was brought in was a change that said that any universal credit changes would be reassessed every 3 months rather than every month. And that stabilises the level of council tax that a household has to pay. There was discretion within that if somebody had a significant increase in income or reduction, we could override that and calculate on a monthly basis. So that's worked quite well. That has been very successful, and it has reduced the number of times people get a new bill throughout the year. So just in terms of section 3 of the report, there's some current information there with regard the end of year 2020-21 in terms of the number of the caseload, the breakdown between working age and pensioners, and the total expenditure at the end of 2021. 3.2 does point out that there was a reduction in caseload, which compared to 31st of March 2020, although there was a slight increase in the expenditure at that time. The increase in expenditure would be attributable to the increase in council tax, basically. And again, the cost of the council tax support scheme is borne by the major preception authorities. And for Boston Borough Council, that cost is around 11%. There is a comparable view there at 3.3, which provides the level of caseload and expenditure as at the 31st of August relating to the current financial year. And again, that will continue to fluctuate throughout the year. So moving into section 4, the proposals for the 2022-23 council tax support scheme. There's a number of reasons why authorities may wish to start looking and changing schemes. One of those is perhaps with a view to universal credit and the move of claimants onto universal credit from housing benefit. Now, that timeline has moved several times, and in fact, since writing this report, it does look now like it has moved another year on. So it does look like the transfer will not be complete to universal credit until 2025 now. The numbers are rising, and particularly with the COVID pandemic, numbers going on to universal credit have significantly increased. But the change that was made by Boston last year to make changes every 3 months is supporting those people. So given the ongoing uncertainties around COVID, the sort of delay in the migration, if you like, to universal credit, in considering the options and proposals for 22-23, there was no real overriding reason for any fundamental changes to the council tax support scheme at this time. So the levels that are provided, any further reduction on the level of maximum support could have significant impacts on the ability to collect money and people's ability to pay that money. So to make savings is probably counterproductive, if you like, by taking one in one hand, if you like, and then trying to take again in the other. So through the considerations for the 22-23 scheme, as I say, there was no overriding reason for fundamental change, and therefore proposals are and consultation is being sought on retaining the current scheme into the next financial year, and that would retain the current level of 75% maximum support for claimants and all of the other provisions that remain in place. And the second area for consultation was to seek views on whether the scheme should be increased in line with the uprating for DWP, and that would keep it in line with the levels for pensioners, if you like, for housing benefit and so on, and keep it consistent and familiar to people. The reasons for those proposals and keeping the same scheme into next year uprated in line with DWP, it retains a scheme which is going to be provides for sort of continuity for claimants, probably at a time when they're experiencing quite a lot of other changes and difficulties. And this would be something that's stable. It would continue in its current form. There would be no major changes or surprises for claimants around this because, as I say, there would be no reassessments. It would just be a continuation based on the new levels of council tax. So it would maintain that consistent approach in respect of Boston's core principles that it's always adopted since 2013-14. But it does continue to recognise those additional needs of the vulnerable, which is taken into account in the calculation of council tax support. There is a section 4.4 does refer to a proposal for a further administrative change. This hasn't formed part of the public consultation. It's more a consideration from an administrative perspective. And that is recognising that at the moment when people move on to universal credit, going back to the days of council tax benefit, there was one application for housing benefit and council tax benefit. It was to the local authority. The local authority determined one application for those two benefits. Since the introduction of universal credit, which is administered by the DWP, it has required claimants to make their application for universal credit to the DWP and to make a further application for council tax support to the local council. The proposal is that we make a change to the scheme which will allow, when somebody does apply for universal credit and they indicate that they would like to apply for council tax support, that we link the CTS claim with the universal credit claim. That's going to simplify it for claimants. For those claimants at the moment who probably go down one road of claiming for universal credit, perhaps delaying to claim for council tax support potentially means they're losing out on support that they need through council tax support. This will sort of close the delay gap, and it would bring that relationship closer together. So the claimant makes one application and we treat that application for a CTS claim as well. So that's the administrative proposal as well that we would ask for consideration of. Just a reminder, the council is required to consult with major preceptors and the public and other interested stakeholders, and that consultation should run for a reasonable period of time. That is currently a live consultation. That is Lincolnshire County Council, Police and Crime Commissioner have been invited to comment on the proposals, and we have on the website the consultation survey is available for the public and stakeholders. The final decision with regard to the local scheme design does of course rest with the council, and that will be taken through cabinet and onto council in January. So that probably concludes the update in terms of the report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond. Thank you very much. It's very, very full report. Anybody wish to speak on this? Do I see anybody wish to speak? Councillor Goodale. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I think the link with the CTS and the award for universal credit is welcome. Am I assuming from that people who haven't been moved to universal credit still have to claim on the old system?
Yes, I can confirm if people move on to universal credit as part of their application, they do get asked a question if they want to apply to the local authority, and we actually receive from the DWP a notification, so the customer doesn't have to do any more. But for people who are not on universal credit, yes, they would still have to apply to the local authority for their application.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. And 5, the additional information. Just really, I think I understand it, but I just went on 5.2 where, I mean, earlier in the report it says our contribution is 11, or cost is 11%, which obviously is our share of the council tax. But in 5.2, it basically says it's the local. It's now a discount. The was fully funded and is now a local discount with the effect of reducing the council tax base. Is it not a grant from the government anymore then?
There is an element of grant which is now subsumed into the overall funding. When the council tax support scheme was introduced in 2013-14, it was a specific amount of money. It was a reduced amount of money, but it was a specific amount of money that could be identified for support for council tax. From 2014-15, that was then subsumed within the wider funding. So there is an element of funding that is still received, but you can't identify that now. The difference between the old scheme of the national scheme is it was a benefit. It was considered to be a benefit at that point. When it transferred to council tax local support, it became a discount. And what we're referring to in terms of the if you like, the proportionate split on that is that the collection fund, it now forms part of the collection fund, and it's attributable in that way in terms of its split between the major precepting authorities. Each of the precepting authorities receives funding, but you cannot identify as specifically now for council tax support.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just was under the impression that we weren't allowed to give discounts on council tax. I thought that was illegal. But obviously not anymore, no. Because I've been saying for ages, we should reward people who recycle properly with a discount. And I'm told you can't do that because that's illegal. But apparently it appears it's not. But yeah, thank you for that. I just wondered how that, because presumably a discount shouldn't be means tested, should it? A benefit is, but how can we means test a discount?
Yeah, and that's one of the differences between the benefits and the discount scheme. But in principle, because we've continued to deliver on the back of the means tested approach, that's the relationship that still is maintained. And you'll often refer to council tax support as referred to as a benefit. people still see it as a benefit. And in fact, in the administration of it, we also, carry on referring to it as a benefit. Just in respect of discounts, there are a number of discounts actually on council tax. So, for example, there's statutory discounts such as single person discount. If a person lives alone, there is an entitlement to a 25% discount. And that's in legislation. That's not something the council can decide or not to apply. But there are also discretionary elements as well, where the council could determine classes of cases whereby it wishes to, reduce council tax. One example I can give, I'm not sure actually if Boston have ever used it, but flooding is an example of that. If properties have been affected by flooding, and probably there's no statutory discounts that could apply, the council could determine to award a local discretionary discount to council tax. So there are ways of actually looking at it, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Judith, yeah, Councillor Wellborn.
Can I ask how long the delay is at present on people that don't claim through universal credit but have to claim council tax support as the old-fashioned way, can I put it?
Yeah, that would be the paper-based way, yeah. Do you mean in terms of current workload position and how long people are waiting? Yeah. We are experiencing extremely high workload volumes in the overall benefit service actually at the moment. That's for housing benefit and for council tax support. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I've only looked at the performance information today, but I can't remember what the number of days to process is currently. Is that something that I may come back to you on? Is that okay? Thank you.
Carry on, please, yeah.
Yeah, I did notice on social media that there was a post up from the sort of benefit part saying that there was a lot of delays. Is it because of staffing or is it because you've got a huge amount of workload? Sorry.
It's we're also delivering the test and trace support payment scheme. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So of course that's taking resources as well. So as well as delivering and dealing with a high workload of normal work, if you like, because more people are looking for benefits and actually because more people are having changes in their circumstances, there is quite high workload, quite a lot of churn at the moment. But our experienced assessment resources are also delivering the government's test and trace support payments as well. And also what we're finding is because customers who might well have come in for face-to-face interactions at Boston, more are now ringing through, so we need more people to answer the phone. So it's almost about juggling all of those things to meet all of those demands, really. So it's actually a combination of all of those things.
So can I say that more staff would be helpful?
Certainly more staff would be helpful, but hopefully this is a peak, and the problem we have at the moment is the uncertainty around what continued effects of COVID and impact on workload we're going to see, and at the moment it's extremely difficult to forecast that.
Happy?
Sorry, I would like to see a lot more staff apparently in that area. I know how difficult the department is, and I think that we're going to have to look at it in the terms of staffing and putting something in there, because COVID at the moment doesn't look like it's going away, and neither the situations it's coming from it. So thank you.
I agree with you. Yes, Councillor Noble, please. Yes.
Just to assure Councillor Wellborn, I mean, there has been a significant reduction in the backlog. I think Mrs. Ham will confirm that since it's gone to PSPS. It has gone down significantly. The other thing I just sort of mentioned, that obviously we consulted with the major preceptors and stakeholders. If anybody wants to know how many responses we've had to date, 20 by the 1st of November. Of course, it ends the consultation on the 12th of November.
Fine. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Noble. Any other comments? I've got one or two, I suppose. I looked at the information on page 24 and 25, and I noticed that actually we're spending less money now than in 2012. The profile of CTB as council tax benefit customers in July 2012. That's it, yeah, was 4.8 million. And then March of this year it was 3.8 million, thereabouts, and a bit slightly more in August, 3.8 million. That's quite, I mean, there's quite a significant change there. Is it because the scheme doesn't really measure up to the issues that we have? Perhaps we're not being generous enough in the circumstance that people find? Go on, yeah.
There's probably a number of circumstances. Looking back at 2012, I can't remember what the economic climate was around then, but that will have that will play
Austerity.
a part. Yeah, was it that? Yeah. So that's going to play a part. But also remembering at that point under the national scheme, working age could also get up to 100% support as well. Now, when the schemes came in across the country, there are no two schemes the same now, I think it's fair to say. And Boston was one of the authorities that went straight to a quite significant cut of 25% for working age. So of course that did have the effect of reducing that expenditure. Things like you'll also notice the pensioner caseload has gone down.
Yes.
But we have to remember things like there's been the change in the pension age as well. So there's all sorts of contributing factors to this. More people now are probably, sort of in work, albeit on different types of contracts, but lots of things will have influenced from, between 2012 and where we are in 2021.
Do you think there'd be a change given the impact of COVID-19 and other things? Do you think that there'll be greater demand on the system because of it?
I think there will be, and as I just alluded to a few minutes ago, what we're finding at the moment is it's extremely difficult to forecast.
Yes.
We, over the past, I mean, forecasting has always got a degree of, are we close or not? But we've always sort of known when our peaks were, we've always sort of known when our expenditure is going to go up. We've always sort of been able to forecast when we're likely to get an increase in the caseload. That has become extremely difficult now since COVID because our normal peaks are just peaks all the time now, and then suddenly we'll get something in from the DWP which sends the peaks even higher. It's really difficult now to say what will happen in the longer term. One of the things I've noticed in terms of differences between the other authorities that I look after is actually, as it stands, and it doesn't mean that this will continue, but Boston's CTS is going down rather than up. But that doesn't mean it won't change over the next few months. As I said, the only position that we're going to be clear on the overall expenditure is at the end of March when we get to the end of the year. It's extremely difficult to forecast with any degree of certainty at the moment.
I understand that. I mean, we're kind of very troubled times in a way. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen next. We don't know whether there's going to be another resurgence of COVID-19 and so on. We don't know. So I do appreciate that, but I am concerned for the welfare of the poorest section of the population. And, we as a council, we need to do all we can to ensure that those who are most vulnerable are well protected. I think that's the thing that concerns me about this. Obviously, we have to balance our books as well. I appreciate that. The finances are not, open-ended. So you have to ensure that we spend our financial support as wisely as possible. But I do concern myself with the welfare of the most vulnerable in our town, and it's a very poor town. So that's my thing. Anybody want to make any more comments? No? Do I wrap this thing up? Yes. All right. Okay. Where are we now? The recommendation is that the committee reviews the scheme to date, reviews the proposals for the 22-23 scheme, then makes recommendations on the council tax support scheme for the 22-23 year for cabinet consideration December 2021 prior to council approval in January 2022. That's the recommendation. Anybody want to propose this? Thank you, Councillor Danny.
I will propose it, and I will need a seconder.
Yep, that's right.
Councillor Frank Pickett.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Pickett. Okay, all those in favour? Councillor Goodale, oh, right. Do you want to read it again then? Right. I presume it says now the recommendation is on my form in front of me, unless you want to put forward another recommendation.
The committee reviews the scheme today. It's here.
It's here.
Can I
Yep.
just have a query there, Chairman,
sure,
please?
yeah.
In 4.4.2, the links to universal credit, there are two options. And the
Yes.
second one is the introduction of the award, which goes straight from universal credit to council tax. Is that an option or is that a recommendation that we can choose? Sorry.
Comments, Andy, what do you think? You know? Sharon, are you able to help us out here?
Yes. The consultation with the public, with the major preceptors and so on, were relating to the two questions, which was around, shall we retain the current scheme and shall we uprate it? And the other change which is proposed is more of an administrative change. I think from my perspective, it would be helpful for this committee to have a view on that.
Okay.
Chair, if I may, yes, I think
Please
it would be helpful for the committee if they were to decide which of the options they prefer, which is obviously, which was number one, to retain the scheme and it as a current scheme for the next financial year to provide continuity, or to uprate it in line with DWP provisions. So if the committee could come to a decision as to which of those options they prefer, that would be really helpful.
Right, we're going to have a decision on it. And Councillor Goodale, you want to speak?
Well, in that case, Mr. Chair, I will move that we actually have the uprated scheme.
Can you repeat that?
And I will also include in that Councillor Wellborn's view that we actually keep an eye on the staffing of this department because of the extra workload that it has at the moment. I know, because obviously with the track and trace, if they're having to deal with that as well, there is obviously extra pressure being put on the staff, and obviously, as I agree with you, we need to be looking at protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. If that's actually putting pressure on the system and meaning that people's claims aren't being processed as expeditiously as possible, then probably we should actually be looking at employing more people if that is necessary. So I'd like to include that in the recommendation as well, Mr.
So this is what, that's 4.3, is it statement 2, is that right? Okay, and recommend more staff for, more staff. I recommend more staff.
Well, I recommend that we keep an eye. If more staff are required, then we should actually do that. Yeah, because obviously, if our staff are being given more extra work, then the workload is increasing. Then I would like to see more staff input to even if it's on a temporary basis, to make sure that the claims are actually handled in an expeditious way, as quickly as possible.
All right. Okay. So if we say that complete the recommendation as given on the in the report, but add and add and add that the committee recommends statement 2, isn't it? Yes. On section 4.3. So the committee recommends section of decision 2 on section 4.3, and also recommends that more staff be appointed if need be. Is that right? Okay.
Chair, sorry, with your indulgence, would it also be possible for members of the committee to express a view whether they support the idea which was put forward by Mrs. Hammond to link the award of universal credit to the council tax support scheme, so the applicants don't have to make 2 separate applications? I don't know.
That's
that
very good.
appropriate, Mrs. Hammond? If we were to do that, it would be helpful, I think.
Yes.
Give a steer.
If we could add that to the recommendation, Chairman, that would be fine. I thought that was part of the upgrade, but thank you.
Can I have somebody, Andy, are you able to someone to help me with the recommendation? I suppose actually, do I take it then the committee reviews the scheme today, reviews and makes recommendation to council tax for consideration in December prior to council. The committee also recommends that on section 4.3 option 2 is approved. Yeah. Recommend more staff if needed, and also to support the which section was it?
The link.
4.42, isn't it?
Yes.
That's right. The introduction of a link to.
So an applicant, when they apply for
Yeah.
universal, they're automatically, if they indicate a wish to, the application for CTS is simultaneous.
So it's the last paragraph, that isn't it? It's proposed for 2023
Yes,
scheme
for-
amended to enable
Yes.
UCDS, new claim notice from DP, treat as a CTS application, therefore by simplifying the process. Okay, I think I just got about that. Hopefully.
Can I suggest? Can Pippa repeat to us the recommendation?
I wouldn't.
Have you?
That sounds pretty tough, Pepper.
Can do. Oh,
Sorry, I was just going to say I can do that. But I think
Okay.
you've captured the 3 things there. That you want to rate in line with the Department for Work and Pensions. Keep an eye on staffing levels and with a view to taking on extra staff if required, and also to link the scheme to the universal credit new claim notice, so that to simplify the process for the claimant.
That's fine. Can I bring in Councillor Welton? Because I think you have a view or a comment to make. You look as though you
Mr.
were
Chairman,
going to.
I was just thinking it would be simple for you to accept the proposals in section 4, plus monitoring the staff levels and increase if required.
Fine, okay. Jeanette, does Councillor Welton's sensible suggestions actually fit in with what you're suggesting?
Yes, Chairman, yes, that would be absolutely fine.
Right, okay, so right, that's fair enough by me anyway. We'll go with what you're suggesting, Councillor, it's Councillor Welton. And Jeanette's also going to liaise with you to make sure that we get everything right. Is that fair to say? Well,
I'm not a member of your committee.
I'm delegating
Chairman.
responsibility to a cabinet member.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can just assist the committee. So Jeanette's got those recommendations summarised as you've just said. So the recommendation will be to uplift the scheme, to support and recommend to the Cabinet that it is linked to the DWP universal claim process, and then that the Cabinet recommend further, because you're recommending to the Cabinet, they recommend on to monitor and increase staffing level, or make recommendations on staffing levels as and when that's required. So
And
that's
this-
all.
and this also. That's section 2.
All of the
Yes.
4 items.
Right.
Yeah,
thank you.
Jeanette had summarised all of those. So
Right.
that I would recommend say that that's what you want to ask to be. Councillor Goodale's effectively proposed it. Jeanette's got it recorded. If you then want somebody to second it and vote on it, then that can be referred through to the
Councillor
Cabinet.
Wellborn, you're going to second this?
I will second it, yes.
Great stuff. Thank you for getting me out of a difficult situation. Right, and the only thing left to do is to say, are all those in favour? Right. You're
that's
very
unanimous,
helpful.
Chair.
Pardon?
That's unanimous.
Good. You're all very helpful to me. You really make my life a lot easier. Thank you very much. Right, we better move on, haven't we? Third item is a progress update on the Local Government Association's peer review, which starts on page 31 of the agenda pack. And James Gilbert, the Assistant Director, Organisation and Corporate Services, will present it. So I'm looking now to James Gilbert. I think I can see you there. James?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councillors. I'll do a brief introduction. I think Councillor Skinner may have some things he wishes to add thereafter. So if I briefly talk us through the report and the appendices, then happy to take questions from the committee as required. So the council undertook or underwent a peer review back in 2019. So peers from the LGA came into the authority, spoke with officers, spoke with members, spoke with partners, and formulated a report back to the authority on its findings. Now, that was a corporate peer review, so it was looking at a raft of corporate issues with a view to making some recommendations on how the council could proceed going forward. And that was based on the views of the peers from the evidence they found when they came into the authority and their experience elsewhere, having worked in either other councils, been members of other councils or officers of other councils across the country. They brought their report back to the authority, which was then adopted, and the council then said it would work towards achieving the recommendations that had been set out in that report. One of the recommendations was that a subsequent peer review took place specifically on the communications function within the council, and a number of recommendations then came out of that review as well. So in Appendix A, you have the recommendations from the main corporate peer review that took place, and alongside that, the recommendations from the communications peer review that took place thereafter. And the recommendations have been RAG rated, so red, amber, green, based on their progress in terms of delivery. Now, clearly an awful lot's happened since the peer review back in 2019. The alliance has formed with East Lindsey District Council in late 2020, and then we've moved on to the partnership with South Holland thereafter. So some of the recommendations are probably a little dated now, and as such are not all green as one would probably hope at this point in time. But significant progress has been made around a number of the recommendations, and some of them probably just need reviewing in context of the new partnership. So I thought it'd be helpful and good practice to make sure the committee was cited on the delivery of the recommendations. East Lindsey went through a similar peer review a little bit after Boston's, and they've been reported, those recommendations have recently been reported through to the overview committee at East Lindsey. So I felt helpful that you were cited on progress as well in terms of delivery. So the report's now set out. Appendix A sets out the recommendations that were received along with their current status in terms of delivery. So happy to take any questions, but Councillor Skinner may have some additional information he wishes to add.
Paul?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's really quite a positive report. There are some really important bits in there, and thing is, we are all advocates of the council, and you have actually mentioned tonight that some people are negative. When we go out in the public, we have to promote Boston and promote the council. There are lots of good things happening within the town, and that should be something that when we go out and do, we should do quite positively. Although there's lots and lots of green in there, that doesn't mean to say we can relax. You know, we've got to drive this thing on. And as a whole, I think it's a really positive report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Thank you very much. Right, anybody want to comment on this? Do I have anybody wishes to speak? Well, Councillor Goodale, it looks like you're about to speak.
I was just smiling, Chairman, if there was anybody interested. I mean, this report has been here before, hasn't it? But it's good to see that a lot of the recommendations have been completed, and there's more green than there is orange. Just no red, which is a positive sign. So other than that, Mr. Chairman, there's not really that much I can say, but it's mainly not really, as James said, really now we need to broaden some of these out now because of the new partnership. But some of the orangey ones, I suppose. I mean, I find it difficult that we've sort of we've gone green now on response to COVID-19, waste management and economic growth, because we haven't really sorted waste management out. Economic growth is ongoing, and so is COVID. So I'm not really sure how we can be green on that one and not orange. But apart from, Chairman, what can you say, really? It is what it is, isn't it? I mean, I agree with Councillor Skinner that we're all advocate should always talk up Boston rather than talk it down. But I think the negatives we can't ignore. We have to grasp them and try and they're the challenges we have. Talking of the positives is easy. That's the easy part. It's grasping the negatives, the challenges, and dealing with them. That's the difficult part. And I think we should concentrate on that as well. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Goodale. I agree. One has to be. One can look at the flowers, but the weeds are there sometimes, and you just got to put them out, haven't you? So we have to be aware of them. But I do also believe that we should be proud of what we've achieved. I think it's very, very important that public have confidence in us, that we have confidence in what we're doing. So I do think that it's very important too for us to promote ourselves as much as possible, but take into account the fact that there may be things that we need to look at. Yeah, Councillor Danley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just come to page 35, which is there is recommendations. The top one, Talk Up Boston, promoting the borough more extensively and assertively would help to shape public perception to reflect your achievements and aspirations. I totally agree with this comment, and I think as councillors it's our duty to promote the town. As councillors it's our duty to talk good about town, and as Councillor Goodale say, we have to take on our chin the negative we faced, but then we can only build up our town from taking the negative and turn it to positive. And as all you know, I have a small business in the town center, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not gonna probably say something different than what I hear from my customers and the people visiting my cafe from Essex, from Cambridge, from Oxford. I have people from Bristol, from Manchester, from Leicester, and 95%, probably 99% of these people, their perception and the way they think of Boston is unbelievably positive. And it's amazing when you hear that. And the first word they say, oh, Boston is a little pretty town. And my answer, I say, yes, Boston is a little pretty town, but it has a heart of a city. We have a lot of things. We have diversity. We have over 32 nations. We have different religions in our towns. Our churches, which they used to be locked, now they're open. There is different communities using them. So it shows you that Boston is going forward. And sometimes to go forward, you're going to meet some of the obstacles and hurdles, but all we have to do is all together as councillors, get together and pass these hurdles, fight them, and create the positiveness we need for the town. And I think Boston can only go forward and thrive. And I think the future for Boston is probably looking more brighter and brighter than before. That's one thing. If we look at the housing and the estate agent, I know a few of them. A lot of people are coming from the south buying houses in Boston. You can't imagine how many people have moved here. People are coming from all around. And I was amazed because I met a person who is coming from Cranwell, Sleaford, to live in Boston. He said, I found it much better than Sleaford, and you have more amenities. And I think I will be very happy with my kids. He has 4 daughters. And I was shocked. So this is Boston, and that's what people think about Boston. And I think it's great for us to be part of it. And I think it's time to embark our ship and go all together for the same direction, is to make Boston a better place and more known place. And in next 2 weeks, I will have the French TV, France 24, which is they're coming to visit Boston again. This is probably their 3rd time, because they want to see Boston, how it's changed. And it's all positives about Boston. They're excited to see Boston again. So, as I said, if we put hand in hand all together as councillors, I think we can achieve more. And I hope we will do in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else wish to make a comment or whatever? I suppose the only thing I would say is that whilst it's very pleasing that people choose to come from the south of England to live in Boston, it does mean that the house prices as such increase, because if somebody sells up their terraced house in, I suppose, Watford or somewhere like that, or for £500,000, they can easily pay high prices in this town. And it means that ordinary people in this town find it difficult to find accommodation. They can't afford to compete with people coming up from the south. The other aspect, of course, is that people of my age range sell up in, I suppose, Neasden for $500,000 and come up here. I'm bringing all my health issues up with me, and that puts a great burden on the health service up here. So it's good that people want to come to Boston. I am concerned about the impact on the local people who are here, their ability to afford decent accommodation, and I'm particularly concerned about the impact on the health services around here, because of the impact of people coming up with serious health issues to this area. We have real problems here with the health service, and the pressure on it is enormous. So that's two aspects of it. Doesn't really relate to the peer review here, I suppose. I think it's okay. I mean, I look through it and think, yeah, fine. Of course, there's going to be some. If I saw everything green here, I'd be a bit worried. But it's not quite like that. It's pretty good, I think. So I think it's a good review. It shows we're on the right pathway and we're going the right way. So we're doing the right thing, and I'm impressed with it. Now, anybody want to make any comments? Anybody want to make any statement or such? No, it's also silent. Everyone wants to go home, I suppose. I can't blame them for that. Fine. Okay, right. I have a recommendation. The recommendation is to consider whether there are any changes required to the priorities in the corporate strategy, and do members feel any changes need to be made? That's the recommendation. Oh, is it?
That's the next item, Mr. Chairman.
It says here. That's right.
The recommendation.
Is it?
It's the recommendation of this paper.
All right. All right, sorry. The committee notes the progress made to deliver recommendations. This one, is it? All right, I'm sorry about that. Of course, that's the fourth one, isn't it? My apologies, therefore, that's my entire fault. I just didn't read the right line. So I have to offer my apologies for my incompetence here. I have to put up with it, I'm afraid, won't you? That the committee notes the progress made to deliver the recommendations, and I'll be happy to do so. And thank you. Right, so I've now been corrected by all of you. So are you happy with that recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah? Everybody's happy. Thank you, James Gilbert, for guiding us through that, and for your clarity in your explanations. Thank you very much for offering your advice and guidance tonight. Right then, so we have a recommendation before us. That the committee notes the progress made to deliver the recommendations, and it appears we're happy to do so. Right, all of those in favor? Oh, we need a. Do I need a proposer and a seconder? It doesn't say so here. I don't think it's not recommended. Is it? Yeah. We're only noting. That's what I thought. So I don't need that, do I? Right. So we go on that basis. Do we need to have? We don't have a vote then, do we? Or do we have a vote?
No, it's only if it's only. You could decide not to note it, but you can't unknow something you now know, Mr. Chairman. So I think you could move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, let's close that one off and let's move on. Yeah, whilst I can, so I don't make any more mistakes. Okay, fine. The next item is an annual review. No, is that right?
No,
that's not, is it?
it's annual review of the corporate strategy.
Yeah, annual review of the corporate strategy, which starts on page 39. That's correct. Yes. And again, James Gilbert, the Assistant Director, that's Organisation Corporate Services, presented. Now, I understand actually Councillor Welton was going to do this. That's correct, is it?
That's correct, Chairman.
So, James, if you're okay on that, I'm going to ask Councillor Welton to present. Is that all right with you?
That's completely fine with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right, okay, that's excellent. Right, okay. Right, okay, right, Nigel.
Thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. Back in November 2020, the full council adopted the corporate strategy, and during that debate, there was a commitment I made when presenting that this wouldn't be a static document. It wouldn't be something that would gather dust. It would actually be a set of priorities that the council would use, and that annually we would review them. Part of that review is to ask the scrutiny committee and members present here to give any recommendations on changes that you feel may be required, or to send me away to Cabinet to say that everything is fine. During one of the during the summary of the report back last year and the recommendations, it says that it should be noted that some of the priorities are no longer are a long-term vision and will not be completed by the end of 2024. However, key building blocks will be put in place to move forward. What that means is that the corporate plan is not something that happens today. It sets the building blocks for things that will happen over a long period of time. So on to the report. The corporate strategy, which was adopted, it followed consultation with stakeholders, including this committee, and all the recommendations that this committee made last year were put into place. There are only 4 priorities in our corporate plan, because when we put this together, we didn't want a document that was 600 pages long with 50 different recommendations and really difficult for everybody to understand. And we wanted something that was very clear, very crisp, and something that the council could take forward. So the 4 priorities were priority 1, which was people, priority 2, which was prosperity, priority 3, environmental awareness, and priority 4, high quality services. And the narrative around that is that our priority is always people. And in order to be people focused, we needed a prosperous and growth in our town to provide the things that people need. We needed it to be environmentally aware so that we dealt with that issue. And in order to do all 3, we needed high quality services. So the report's in front of you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to talk much more. What I'm here for is to take back from this committee any recommendations that you may have or may not have, or any other comments you wish to make.
Thank you very much, Councillor Welton. Anybody wish to comment? Andy, is this a part of it as well? Or is this, where does this come?
No, that's discussion in the work program.
Okay. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just would like to ask Councillor Walton about the 4 priorities. The 3rd one, which is environment, awareness and accountability. We do know now, I mean, we had a big problem with the fly tipping, and it's not good for the environment. And I mean, just a few days ago, I was in Scotland again talking about the climate change and how we can save the earth and our planet so we can preserve it for the next generations. If Councillor Walton just give me probably an insight of how far did we go with this awareness of the environment with the public, because our priority is the people. So how we are combining the 2, and have we achieved anything yet, or is there anything on the table, or are we working on something? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danny. It's not for me here tonight to tell you what other portfolio areas and how they're achieving. It's about whether the priorities that we've set are still fit for purpose. And priority 3 in the narrative, in the full document, says that we will work with partners to encourage the community to produce less waste and recycle more. So that is a priority. And also proactively educate and enforce against environmental crime, such as fly tipping and littering, to both protect the environment and keep the borough clean and tidy. So I believe that what you're asking is actually in that, in the corporate strategy as a priority.
Thank you.
Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Welton. That's very thorough. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Goodale.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Welton said, it's about priorities, and I always find with these documents, most of it is very difficult to disagree with, and it's the strategies that underpin the words that really count. But just on the face of it, when in Boston's amazing place to live and work, we have in what's the second point down, invest and support growth in local housing needs by co-funding affordable housing delivery, which I mean I fully support that. Obviously, that we need to support the need for local housing and the need for more affordable housing and its delivery. But I just wonder if that's the appropriate phrase, that's all, the co-funding of affordable, because if we are looking at, I mean, I appreciate where that's come from, but if we're looking at possibly developing a strategy of providing our own housing in the future, then possibly that could be it, because this is a vision document. Probably that could be reflected in that part somewhere. I mean, I understand the co-funding as it operates at present, but if the authority has a vision of providing its own affordable housing again, then that's a vision, and I think that probably should be in there. Do you want me to continue, or shall I
keep going, please?
Thank you. I mean, majority of it is fine. I have no problem with the majority of it. I do wonder whether we should remove the where we keep referring to the PE21 project or the ambition of because that effectively is no longer exists in the form that it was promoted, and I do think that it's a bit confusing to residents and other people. I mean, my understanding of it, most of the PE21 original plans, if you like, will never come to fruition, and a lot of it's been changed, or the vision has been changed. So are we just using it as a generic vision that keeps expanding and changing, or should we just not bother with the PE21 project in these documents, but look for a different phrase? I'm sort of, I think we just probably set out, nothing wrong with the ambition of what we're talking about, but obviously, like some of the things that were in that are not an ambition anymore. So I just wonder whether they should change that. But apart from that, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think the actual vision is fine. It's still relevant. I think the thing I'd like to probably see on the environment is more mention of flooding, but we do actually say that we will work with other stakeholders and that sort of thing in there. So I do wonder whether we should have a mention of that, because obviously without the recent map that's just been put out would suggest that most of the Lincolnshire is going to be underwater in the next 10 years. Which would make most of us sat here totally irrelevant. But apart from that, I mean, you know, the majority, most of it is still relevant anyway. And I say the most important things at the end of the day is what policies we have underneath these to promote these things and make them happen. That's where I have a problem, not with actually the words in here. It's the things we actually support these with I have a problem with, not the actual words. But thank you, Joe. Just a couple of thoughts there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Welton, can you come on to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's no secret that for me to have our own housing stock is always a priority. And the reason it says co-funding is that whatever ambition we do have, we would never be able to do it alone. Co-funding would include government funding through Homes England and various other grants. So by having co-funding in there, as far as the P21 is concerned, I think you may be right around using a specific postcode, but it does talk about an explore delivery. So the actual statement in the document which I'm looking at here says develop the bold investment plan and explore delivery models for the PE21 ambition. And the same with environmental and flooding, there are words in there. And the reason for the document being so short initially was I looked at, when I did the research before putting this together, that the corporate plans around the country were so defined that there was no flexibility to do anything. And during the discussions that I had with lots of people around how we put the plan together was, if we can put a plan together that encompasses all of our ambitions without restricting our officers at this level. It's, as you've rightly said, it's the policies and procedures and the detail underneath this document that gives the meat to it. This is an overarching document that says that Boston Borough has an ambition to do this. It has an ambition to do that. And it gives the flexibility for housing, for example, by saying co-funding. It doesn't restrict us to self-funding. It doesn't restrict us to just external models. It allows the expansion of housing through various different models. And as government grants change around housing, for example, it doesn't restrict us on that and doesn't say, well, we can't go that way because it doesn't say in the corporate plan. The corporate plan is the headline, how we deliver that going forward. But I'm more than happy to look at some of the rewording around PE21 and maybe have that something more around town centre management, town centre development. If that's helpful, I'm quite happy to take them comments to Cabinet on the 8th of December.
Councillor Welton. Yes, Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, coming back to what Councillor Welton was talking about housing. I mean, he, as a member of the Plan Committee, he'll know that the target for our authority is 20% affordable housing. He'll probably also know that there's a scheme probably coming to fruition very shortly on Toot Lane for hundreds of houses, which are all affordable houses. And I think from the council's point of view, we'll be looking what's the most cost-effective way of delivering low-cost housing in the borough. And of course, we have given some financial help to social housing providers such as Waterloo. I think they're now called platform housing. The other point about PE21, obviously a lot of that was dependent on getting the 20 million from the Levelling Up Fund, which has not been successful. So obviously there'll have to be a lot of rethought going into that particular project because, for example, the development of around the college, that wasn't going to be sufficient just with the town's fund monies. So plans will have to inevitably change and be moderated.
Councillor Welton, do you want to come back on that?
Not really, no. But very valid points, but thank you very much, Councillor Noble, really good. I'm just wondering on recommendations, whether you want to make any specific recommendations. I'm sure Mr. Gilbert has made lots of notes of the comments coming back. I'm quite happy to take them as that. If you're happy with the document in its entirety, as there doesn't seem to be any so far any specific bits in there that are holding us back as far as I can see from the debate tonight. So I'm quite happy to take the comments that have been made and discuss at Cabinet, or go through any formal recommendations you wish to make.
I don't think there'll be any change in recommendation unless the members want it. I'm sure that James has taken into account everything that's been said. Is that fair to say, James?
That's absolutely fair to say. And if Councillor Welton, Suzanne and I take a paper through to the Cabinet, should there be any changes that the Cabinet wishes to make to the corporate plan, it will be a matter for full council anyway, because full council are responsible for the corporate plan as a document under the Constitution. So I'll have a conversation with Councillor Welton post the meeting and we'll take a paper through to the Cabinet in the first instance based on the recommendations and views this evening.
Fine, thank you very much, James. I suppose for me, I do come back to bits of flooding. It's about resilience, isn't it? The resilience of the area to defend itself against various issues that may arise. Flooding is obviously a very, very serious one for this area. I mean, we had a lucky escape in 2013 when the river overflowed and did a great deal of damage to certain parts of the town, but not others. So we were very fortunate then. Second time round, we might not be so lucky. I mean, if it was another 2 or 3 feet higher than that, I think we'd all be swimming around, wouldn't we? So I don't know I don't know what we can do on that. But I think as things stand, I don't have any problems with this. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's excellent. And as Councillor Welton said, it's better to have something which is concise rather than runs to three volumes. It becomes difficult then to find out what you're doing. So I'm broadly supportive of this, but I do think resilience is the one thing we need to be careful about, because it could upset all our plans. That's really the thing I'm concerned about. But anyway, yes, Councillor Goodale, please. Yeah.
It's most me, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Goodale. I mean, I'm quite happy to move that we support the the corporate priorities and this corporate strategy, and that council. I'm quite happy for council. I want to take away the comments of this committee to just look at the wording. But I think that the priorities, the corporate priorities, and what there's nothing really anybody to disagree with, is there?
So you're proposing that, aren't you? You're proposing, and we look for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Wellborn. Excellent. Right, so we've got a proposer and a seconder, and I have to ask. Paul, do you want to make a comment? Councillor Skinner.
Yes, please, Chairman. You just mentioned the flooding. I actually think what's been put in the press is totally irresponsible. We've just had major investment from the EA. We've had the barrier. The banks have been increased to 1 in 200, whereas they're 1 in 100 in the times of 2013. If it's not going to make any difference to the local people's insurance and stuff, and also our security, it makes very little sense. And from the point of view of the next 10 years, if you look at the figures that are on NASA, it's 3.5 millimeters a year. I mean, if the polar ice caps melt, well, we're all in trouble. But it's not likely as long as we all take a responsible point of view. And obviously, climate is quite high on my personal agenda, and it'll probably be the first policy that's across 3 councils. So there you go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I think the comment to be made is also we can have flooding from the rivers themselves. It's not just from the sea. The sea is the obvious, the clear one. But of course, if we have very, very heavy rainfall in the centre of England, then it all comes our way, doesn't it? One way or another. And you can have very heavy fluvial flooding. So that it's a two-way edge, isn't it, really? Not just rising sea levels, it's also climate change.
But for a long time, we've been treating this water as a problem. It's about time we started treating it as a resource, because with the climate change itself, we're going to need to store this water. And AW are actually presenting a paper at COP26 tomorrow about 1 o'clock, so which includes their proposals for this part of the world. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. I suppose my only comment on that is, please don't use my house as part of the, the storage system.
We would never dream of it, Stephen.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Thank you, Paul, very much. Okay, we have agreed on something. I think we do have a vote, don't we? That's right.
Yes.
So, to consider whether there's any change required to the priorities in the corporate strategy, do members feel any changes need to be made? We've made comments. James is going to put things together for the cabinet. So if we have a vote on it, is that okay? All of those in favour? Wow, great stuff. Excellent stuff. Thank you very much. And now we move on to the work programme, which appears on page 45. And I'm going to pass over to Andy Fisher, because Andy's got some recommendations to make on this, which I think we need to listen to because of the number of items coming through.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I can first start, you'll see within the papers there is some performance information. Just to clarify for the committee, the performance information is always presented as part of the work programme as an opportunity for you to consider whether the key performance data that is relevant to this committee actually stimulates you to request any particular scrutiny of the topics that your committee comes under. So that's why that data is there. So at the last meeting of the committee, we agreed to have a single agenda item for the January meeting. And if you recall, we were going to look at the legal framework for housing. That's what the committee asked for. Since the committee met and prior to the publication of the papers, a request came forward that you consider the Lincolnshire Discretionary Housing Assistance Policy. That's a county-wide document that needs to transit through to Cabinet for a decision and its adoption. Also, there's been a request for a number of other papers to come to you, Mr. Chairman. Given the way the Constitution works, papers come here for you to scrutinise before they refer on to the Cabinet for adoption or further referral to Council, depending on what those reports are. So there's been a request for you to consider the cultural strategy that Economic Development colleagues have developed in January, and for you to receive an annual safeguarding report in January, and also through EMP, and Councillor Wellborn's here tonight, to consider a paper around Centrepoint outreach and the operation. Clearly, Mr. Chairman, it's not for me to make recommendations to the committee that you have to consider, but what I would offer is that 5 items in January, I think you would either do each one very little justice, or your meeting would probably require a resolution to go beyond the 3 hours. What I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, for the committee, and clearly it's your decision, that those 5 items need to be considered over 2 meetings. I think otherwise you'll struggle to get value out of them. What I would suggest, given the papers that need onward referral, and please, I'm not saying that you should,
right.
but cultural strategy is important to come in January. That requires onward referral. The annual safeguarding report is important to consider in January, and also the Lincolnshire discretionary housing assistance policy. What I would offer to the committee is that the legal framework for housing control, because that was a request item for information rather than anything that you will be making recommendations on specifically, and a paper on Centrepoint probably go to your February committees. I do know there's some questions in relation to Centrepoint and its operation that I can certainly, for the MP committee members that are on this committee tonight as well, Councillor Welburn, I can certainly ask the lead officer, Phil Starting, to get in touch with you, just so that you can have that discussion, introduce the individual to Centrepoint, and that might, address some of those issues, and then come on if that would be helpful.
Can I just come in on that?
Yep.
I have had the conversation with Phil already.
Excellent.
So, yeah, he's well aware of what's happening. So thank you, Andy.
Thank you. On that basis, does that still that's a recommendation from EMP that comes here? So on that basis, it could be a February one, and then it's down to the committee whether it accepts that recommendation to come here. So that would be my view, Mr. Chairman. You take the 3 papers in January that need forward, that need scrutiny, observation, and recommendation to Cabinet, and legal framework for housing, and whether Centrepoint comes are February items for you. I think that would be manageable, and that would certainly aid officers who are routing things through the constitutional machinery we have.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I've obviously missed it. I did, from your email the other, was it last week, about the mayoralty was supposed to be coming to us? I don't know,
yes,
that's not here.
That's right.
I assume this legal framework for housing control, is this the item I asked for with regard to licensing of rented property? I mean, there will be hopefully a recommendation coming from that we actually do license rented property, rather than it just being just something to look at. I mean, I accept that this committee has a workload and things need reporting forward back to Cabinet or Council, whatever. But I actually think one of the biggest problems in Boston at the moment is private rented housing. And if we keep ignoring it, which it seems to me is the case, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I asked the portfolio holder about this last year, probably the year before. I sent an email around to all members. And all that happens is it just keeps, the carpet keeps getting lifted up and it keeps getting brushed underneath. It wouldn't get brushed underneath if people had to live with it like the people who, some of the rented accommodation, the people that in my ward, it wouldn't be swept under the carpet, I can assure you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mapp promoted you, that's it. So
right. I don't mind.
I mean, I don't mind it going back. I don't mind it going back a meeting, but at the end of the day, it is one of the most important things happening in this town. we're allowing our town to be turned into a third world bloody ghetto. And that's what's happening. And we can ignore it as much as people want and say it's not happening as much as people want, but it is happening. And it's not only happening in my ward, it's happening all over Boston. You can walk down most streets in the town and see black plastic bags piled up on the front of houses because there's too many people in them. And what are we doing? Oh, well, it's only just a report. It can stay back, and maybe next year, maybe the year after. At the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I keep promoting
Right,
it.
don't worry about it.
We do need to really sort this problem out and look at it. And although I'm happy to go back, I mean, I raised this issue and you graciously accepted to put it onto your agenda. But it is one of the most important things happening in this town. You know, we are allowing our town to be turned, I don't like to say this, but we are to be turned into parts of it into probably a ghettoizing part of this town. I think wouldn't be an unfair comment. And I think we really seriously need to just look at it properly. So I don't mind it going back 1 month, Mr. Chairman, if that's the committee's wish, but it's something we really do need to look at. Thank you.
Right, okay, that's a very important point. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. If I may make a suggestion, when it does come in February, would it be surely helpful to the committee if you had a senior housing officer come to deliver a report here to answer questions specifically, and also probably the portfolio holder to come as well? Would that be helpful?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, the original request, if you remember, was to for somebody to come along and present exactly what the legal framework for control is, from which you were then going to consider what, if anything, more you would require the council to consider. One thing you could also do, it's within, and Jeanette will correct me, but I think I'm correct in saying it's within the gift of the scrutiny committee to look at setting up a task and finish group to consider, so that actually it could do much more detailed work rather than receive either a single paper or a single presentation, and you know, within a 2-hour session and make its view. So members of the committee could look in more detail at what's actually set in the legislative framework, and then reconcile the art of the possible against what the committee sees in reality, and as Councillor Goodale has said, you know, on the streets of Boston and the villages of our surrounding parishes.
That's personally, I'd have thought actually a task and finish group might follow a report here. The report comes here, and then we just have a task and finish group, and then it comes back again. Councillor Wellborn.
No,
Johnson.
I've already made my contribution, my suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Wellborn.
I think actually, I mean, I welcome what Councillor Goodale has said, and I quite agree. It was something I brought up at licensing a long while ago, but I think if we do it with the centre point issue of the homelessness, it would link very well together, because obviously we get a lot of people at centre point that are in HMOs or been thrown out of HMOs. So I think the two things would complement each other and would make quite a good debate on the night. So I do support what Councillor Goodale says. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Goodale, do you make a proposal?
Well, I'm taking on board what Mr. Fisher said. I mean, we may disagree on what our thoughts were supposedly coming. I mean, I'm happy for this to set up a task and finish group so it can be looked at probably in a more in-depth way. If that would be the case and the only item would be to set up a task and finish group, then possibly that could still go on to the January meeting, just with a recommendation to set up a task and finish group to look into this item, and to actually make sure that it reports back to either the February or the April meeting, I think would be as long as it should take. I agree with Councillor Wellborn that the centre point and the issue are very similar, but to some degree, HMOs are licensed and regulated already. My concern is the unlicensed and unlicensable, because they're not actually HMOs, because technically they're all related, but it doesn't stop 20 of them living in a house. And that's the problem. When you get a 2-bedroom house with 14 people living in it, that is not, we should not be allowing that sort of thing to happen in this country. And I don't care where you come from, that we should not allow that. I accept that people are making a lot of money out of this, but that's not my concern. My concern is the welfare of the people in those houses and the welfare of the people that have to live next door to those houses. And that's where we should be concentrating on, not the benefit of the people making a fortune.
Councillor Welton, please, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel a bit of imposition really, not being a member, not on the committee, but I just had a thought. If in your February meeting committee you were asking for how the framework works, so that you can have that quicker, would it make sense for that to be an all-member briefing, where all your members of your committee could be at that briefing and gain all that information and knowledge from the relevant officers, so that when you could have it on the agenda in February, it would be then a much quicker agenda item and a much smoother running agenda item, because you've all had that member briefing. And if you were then wanted to go to a task and finish group to look at it in detail, you've already had the information that it could be a very quick agenda item to move it to a task and finish group if that's what you wanted.
Firstly, you're very welcome to make contribution to this meeting. I appreciate that you may be a member of the committee, but as far as I'm concerned, you've got things to say and we want to hear them. So that makes it very relevant. Now, Councillor Goodale, where do we go from here? Because you're calling the shots.
I'm in your hands, Chairman. I mean,
oh really?
Obviously, yeah, I'm afraid so. Obviously, I want to see this item debated. I want to see a resolution to it. I mean, obviously, I would have liked it to have been resolved already. But at the end of the day, if your workload is such that it can't come to the January meeting, I mean, could we make a recommendation this evening that we set up a task and finish group to look at that item? Could we do that?
Sorry, I was going to say, it's not officer workload, it's how much the committee could get through in a single night, given the scope.
I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Fisher. I mean, I wasn't suggesting it was the officer workload, but it's workload of this committee. I appreciate that. And obviously nobody wants to be here for hours and hours and hours. I think we all appreciate that as well. So, I mean, I am happy for it to be moved, but I would just like it to actually get work started on this as soon as possible. In another 2 months' time, we're going to have the changeover again, and we're going to have all the mattresses back out on the streets again, all the furniture back out on the streets again. You know, and it's just an ongoing problem. So I would like to see it resolved as soon as possible. So I'm in your hands to whatever you think is possible. But if we could set up a task and finish group, that's great. Sooner the better, in my view. Whenever you can accommodate that, that would be, or the officers can accommodate that, that would be a way forward, in my view. But I accept what Councillor Welton says about the an all-member briefing. I think it is important that members are well aware of what is happening. But as far as the licensing goes, my understanding is that you can actually, this authority could actually implement a small scheme to a pilot scheme of licensing all private rented property in a small area, providing it's only a certain percentage of the properties. But if we wish to have a proper scheme, a full scheme of the whole town, then we need authorisation of the Secretary of State. So my initial request to the cabinet member was that we introduce a licensing scheme in Station Ward. That has not materialised. I was invited to join the portfolio holder on a certain way forward. That hasn't materialised either. So basically, I'm left with no other alternative but to keep coming back to this committee and keep asking for us to look at this item.
Councillor Wellborn, did you want to make a comment?
Well, I would welcome a member briefing, if that's possible, before the next February meeting on this item. And I definitely think, you know, we need more information, if there is information out there that will help us to make a resolution. So, yes.
Thank you. Just coming back to the same subject, I mean, HMOs and licensing, we have to bear in mind that there is subletting So some of the houses are subletted or they're let to someone and then they're renting to their friends. And most of the people who rent these houses, they don't exist. But sometimes they don't live in the country, but they're getting the money in their accounts. So this is the things we should tackle actually, and that's probably the officer should tackle. But then we come back to another issue, which is, are our services adequate and fully staffed to do these jobs on daily basis until we get rid of these things? I think we need some briefing. We need to know how things are working.
Yeah,
And
I don't disagree with you, Councillor Danny, but surely if we have a licensing programme, then the people that actually own the houses have to be on the licence. And if we make those responsible, then they will make sure whoever is in them legitimately rather than just taking the money.
I agree with that. I mean, I think we need to make sure the people who own the properties are responsible for their properties, and we need to enforce it.
So, Mr. Chairman, would it help then if I seek to, through Democratic Services, to arrange an all-member briefing as soon as a date can be selected? I can't think that there are times in the diary already for members. I don't know what we've got, but if I look to do an all-member briefing and then a report comes in February, would that be okay? Because I think what's important, it's difficult for me to disassociate myself. I know what the legal framework around housing is. However, for 18 months, housing's not been within my managerial remit. So I think listening to the debate, what would be really helpful would be to have an all-member briefing on the licensing of houses in multiple occupation. That becomes the focus. What's also important for you to know is that how general housing regulation works. So you've spoken about people being single households. You can't license a single household, but you can control occupation either under Part 10 of the Housing Act 1985 or through the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. So if I arrange for, I think it's Mr. Challen, who's now responsible for housing standards, to give you a presentation, which will be, I'm sure, will be very similar to a number that I've done previously, because the law is the same, and ensure that he really educates members in terms of what you can, what the art of the possible is. He will set out for you that it needs to be data-led and evidence-led, and without that evidence and data, it's not lawfully possible to implement. But I'll get him to set all of that out again. Members will be able to pose a whole series of questions, and we'll be able to, as officers, will be able to set out and clarify those. And then from there, bring a paper back here in February, and the committee can then recommend formally through its recommendation process to Cabinet, that Cabinet does or considers A, B and C as a consequence of that discussion in February. Would that satisfy the demand? As I say, there's
Councillor Goodale. Sorry.
Oh, well, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I've heard Mr. Fisher's I've had debates many times before, and I accept what he says. But I mean, you see the evidence every bin day about antisocial behaviour, which is one of the key factors. You see the evidence every bin day with all the black bags and rubbish and in the road. We see it every day, every bin day. So I don't think we'd have to much problem improving the need because of antisocial behaviour. All the dumping of rubbish out on the street is, to my mind, is antisocial behaviour. So I don't see there's a problem. But if it's the best I'm going to get, Mr. Chairman, then I'll accept it. I'm a pragmatist.
Well, the best that you can get is what you want.
Fortunately, that isn't possible.
Well, no, I know, but what you will get is what the best this committee can offer you. It's not about whether it's. I mean, I'm not a miracle worker.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I think at the end of the day, I mean, I understand that the HMOs, the licensing of HMOs, and I know Mr. Fisher's done a lot of work on that, and I've spoken to him many times on that issue. It's these houses that are not licensable as HMOs that concern me.
So, but what do you want?
What
do you want?
I mean, I'm in the hands of, if Mr. Fisher says we'll have an all-member briefing on the art of the possible, then that's fine. But it needs to be the art of the possible rather than just restrict it to HMOs, because HMOs have a licensable thing anyway already. It is the art of the possible with regard to rented property, all rented property, overcrowded rented property, sublet rented property, whatever you want to call it, but substandard rented property.
Mr. Chairman, no problem. I mean, it is possible to license non-HMOs, provided the data is there. So if I try to get colleagues who are now responsible for housing to arrange with Democratic Services an all-member briefing this side of Christmas, you'll have evidence or you'll have certainly information to hand. You can seek anything else as members you wish, and you'll be better armed for a formal paper in February.
Will that be acceptable to you, Councillor Goodale?
It's acceptable, Chairman. It's a step forward.
I understand
any,
that, but,
any move forward is acceptable.
Oh. Well, at least I've achieved something tonight then. Please, Councillor Goodale, that's amazing. Yes.
Can I say something? Because we're just probably changing the subject because we can mash it all night. It's something I would like to probably know, if Andy will agree, is to have probably an update on our parkings. The reason why I'm talking about here, because we're on the red, a percentage of car parking income received against a budget. If we can, I think, have an update from the portfolio holder as well. And by the way, I will pass my condolences to one of our parking attendants who passed away, I think Sean Lewis. And I think we used to have 3. Now we have only 1, I think, which is active on our parkings. And I think we're losing a lot of money because nobody's checking after 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So our parkings are like for free to be used. So I would like to know how many fines and penalty charges have been issued after 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, because our parkings are, I think, until 9 in the evening. So we have only 1 person doing the parkings. He does it in the morning, but the rest of the day, there's no one. So I would be interested how much money we are losing probably.
Councillor Noble, I'm going to call you.
The appreciation on the agenda, but what I suggest is Councillor Danny, all these various questions he's just put them on an email to me and I'll endeavour to answer them as quickly as possible. In terms of car parking income, I can tell you that at the moment, the last we had was September, we were budgeted originally to receive 73,000 in that month and we received 63,000. Revenue from our parking permit is just slightly above what we originally anticipated, and that's nearly £6,000. So if one were to presume that for the next few months we were to be £10,000 down per month, you can times that by 10 and you'll get a figure of the shortfall from what we originally anticipated. But there's so many variables. We don't know, for example, Christmas, just quite how busy we'll be. I've heard that apparently there are going to be fewer council-provided attractions over Easter. That may impact on the number of visitors to town. We don't know. But the prognostications, the predictions as to the future income and its shortfall is not as dire, I think, as was originally suggested it would be. So questions to me, please, Councillor Danny.
I will
on an email, and I
will definitely do that. I will definitely do that, Councillor Noble, because I think we're missing a lot of money on penalty charges because people are parking at certain times, I think, for free. So this is from my experience, just to let you know. So as I said, we have only 1 parking attendant at the moment. So I think we need to look at hiring maybe some more people. Thank you.
Nigel, Councillor Welton, can you go back to, you want to go back to Councillor Goodale? Right,
Thank
fine.
you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Goodale, to assist you in your endeavours, which I have support for, could you send an email to have this put on the agenda at the next group leaders meeting?
I can. Believe them. I can. I don't think it shall happen, but I can.
Right, okay. Now, so we're going to have a briefing on...
Yeah, thank you. So your work programme, 13th of January, will be cultural strategy, annual safeguarding report and Lincolnshire housing assistance policy. Then in February, it will be legal framework for housing control and centre point outreach. And prior to all of that, we will seek to arrange, subject to Democratic Services obviously being able to arrange it, an all-member briefing around licensing of housing, particularly both single occupancy and multiple occupancy, and have officers there to answer any questions around the legal framework that members will pose at that member briefing.
Right, now, that is acceptable to Councillor Goodale, isn't it? I have asked that question because I don't want to be on the wrong side of you, Councillor Goodale.
That's quite all right, Chairman. You never get on the wrong side of me, you know that. Yeah, that is acceptable.
There is one other thing, of course, the mayoral issue, which was raised at the last meeting, I think, and I think I did send you a memo on that, didn't I? So that will need to be put in a later meeting, say April's meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you're happy, we can populate the forward plan for April with that agenda item.
With that one, it must be included, okay? Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot of concerns raised about the status of the mayoralty and its support and so on. And I think it's very relevant, the fact that transport has been effectively been denied to too many mayors.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it when I was mayor, and I want other mayors to enjoy being mayor.
Yes.
And if you're running around on your bike, it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah. So we'll put that on the agenda for the April committee meeting.
Thank you very much.
I must admit, Chairman, it has been difficult.
I know. You ought to be given a bonus.
We should have a compensation.
I think you should, yes.
That's
Definitely.
right. Yeah, it is difficult. It really is.
It is very difficult. And I think this must be addressed. You know, it's very, very serious, I think. Particularly for anybody who's, in difficult circumstances. And for those of us, I suppose, who have had to endure this, there should be some compensation scheme, shouldn't they? Free bottle of wine. No.
I know compensation and money.
Most of the problem is finding somewhere to park when you turn up.
It's the parking, the chain,
everything
with you.
I know.
You have to come back late at night. And you cannot
It's not right.
You cannot enjoy the dinner. You have to think about time. I mean, if in winter it's even difficult, to travel here somewhere which is you don't know. So.
Well, I had to go to Spilsbury today, and I got the chains on, so I borrowed a scarf and put the scarf over just to.
It's not right. I mean, I'm fully in favour of what you're saying. I think it's absolutely wrong. I opposed this when he went through about the reductions and I knew the damage that would be done to the mayoralty as a result, and the people doing it. It wasn't right, and it needs to be rectified. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I think it must be time to go, actually, isn't it?
Thank you.
Any questions before we depart? You all want to stay here?
You want to stay here?
Thank you very much indeed for your support in the evening. And I made quite a few mistakes, but you didn't seem to worry about it, which is a good thing. And you corrected me when I went wrong. So I want to thank you very much indeed for your support.